Lesson 9.5, we are going to be solving quadratic equations by graphing. So it's kind of the same thing that we did in lesson 9.4, just a little bit different. So first of all, remember how a quadratic equation is set up. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Sometimes it's not given to you in that perfect form, and we have to rewrite it so that it is in that perfect form. So first of all, let's write the standard equation or standard quadratic form, which is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. First of all, you say, well, hold on a second. There's no y at all in this problem. So how am I going to do this? What you do is you get one side equal to 0, and then we can exchange the y and the 0. 0 and y are the only number-letter combination that can be exchanged for one another. Okay? So if I want to get one side of this equation equal to 0, John, what would be the easiest thing for me to do? Add 6. Perfect. Because what's going to happen here is it's going to cancel out, and it just moves to this side. Now, does 6 have a like term to combine with on that left side? No. So I'm just going to write, remember, we want to write our a term first, which is x squared. So we're going to write x squared. Then b needs to come next, which is negative 6x. And then lastly, c plus 6 equals 0. Now, we have everything where it needs to go except for it doesn't look exactly like a standard. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write y equals, then I'm just going to write my equation, x squared minus 6x plus 6. And this is now in standard form, okay? If you would have not done this, your A, B, and C, whenever you tried to find them, would be messed up because you would say, oh, A is 1, B is negative 6. Those would have been right. But you would have told me that C was negative 6, and it's not. C is positive 6. That's why we have to move it, okay? Okay, so on the next one, we want to get one side equal to 0. Remember, anytime you don't see a y equals, we know automatically, okay, I've got to get one side equal to 0. So what do I need to move? John? I don't want to move the 5, which, not just the x, the 3x squared, because you just want to get one side equal to 0. So we want to do the side that only has one thing to move. I could technically subtract the x and subtract the 5, but then I've got more steps to take. So I'm going to subtract 3x squared, subtract 3x squared. Now I want to write the first term. Let's go ahead and write it y equals, because I know it's going to end up like that, so I might as well just go ahead and start with it. Which term has to come first? Negative 3x squared, because that's our ax. Which term needs to come next? Plus 1x, and I'm going to write the 1 there just so I know. And then what term comes last? Plus 5. Here's my equation in standard form. Okay, so on the third one, what should I move? Let's do the 6x squared. That'd be fine. So we subtract 6x squared so it cancels out. And then, so I'm going to write y equals negative 6x squared, then plus 12. Do I have a b term? No. So it would just be 0. So you just write it just like this. If you're ever totally missing a term, it just means that it's 0 and it's not there. Okay, so now they're saying they've already given you a graph. So this picture here is something that they would give you, all right? So you would see it in your book, or you'd see it on a quiz, or you'd see it on a test, all right? And it says use the graph to solve the equations. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm trying to find out what x equals. You say, well, how in the world am I going to do that? Okay, this is what I can do. I can look for the place that the parabola or the graph crosses the x-axis. So see how it crosses right here? And see how it crosses right here? So x is going to equal -3 and +3. And that's my answer. You can put positive, negative. Okay? So all you're doing is you're just looking for the place that the graph crosses the x-axis. And that's what x equals. All right? However many times it crosses is how many answers you're going to have. So see how it moves over, or I'm sorry, it crosses the x twice. That's how many answers you're going to have. All you've got to do is use your eyeballs to find these answers. There's no work at all involved. All right, so let's do the next one. Let's look at this parabola. It says, use the graph to find the roots. Roots and the solution are the exact same thing. They're two interchangeable words. So sometimes you'll see solution, sometimes you'll see roots. Roots just means what does x equal. Solution means what does x equal. So that's why I put the two different words on here so you wouldn't be confused. Like, wait a second, what does roots mean? It just means find what x equals. So where would I look to find what x equals, Markeisha? Where it crosses. So I look, x is going to be equal to -3. And on this one, x is equal to 1. So not always will you have a positive and a negative. Sometimes they'll both be negative. Sometimes they'll both be positive. So you can have just like that. Okay?
Wait, what do you mean sometimes they'll be both negative?
So like if your graph were to look like this.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you could have both of your answers as a negative. Okay? So let's go on to the next one. Now it says graph the parabola to find the roots. So basically, we are doing exactly what we did yesterday. We are graphing the parabola to find the roots. I just want you to graph it. But first of all, time out. Think about what we learned in example 1. Is this equation in standard form? No. So, and I cannot just sit here and label A, B, and C. What do I need to do first, John? Turn one side into a 0. Zarek, what do you think I should move to turn one side into a 0? Very good. So in order to move 2, I subtract it. X squared minus x minus 2. I'm sorry, I should have put the y in front of that first so we didn't have to rewrite it. Y equals x squared minus x. I'm going to put a 1x there. Minus 2.
How did he know which line to subtract?
You can do either side. It doesn't matter. Usually always do the one with one number on it because that's less work for you. Okay? So what is A in this first equation? 1. What is B? -1. What is C? -2. So what's the first step? Remember, this is reminding us, or we're just basically reviewing what we did yesterday. What's the first step to graphing? X equals negative b over 2a. Very good. What if b is already negative? Make it a positive. So 1 over 2 times 1. What am I going to get now?
1 over 2.
A fraction. You say, oh, we've never graphed a fraction before. It's okay. We'll graph it today. X and Y.
When did you do algebra?
No, because it's not. We're not finding the slope. This is the x value of the vertex. Okay, so what number goes in the middle? 1/2. What is the next number that is larger than 1/2 that is a whole number? 1. What's the next number after that that's a whole number? 2. What's a number smaller than 1/2? 0. That's a whole number. And the number after that is -1. Okay? So now, I'm going to get out my calculator. There's a problem here. Because when we use our calculators, Remember that's part of the problem that we have to put the step, and the step's always 1. But that's because each number on the x goes up by 1. But if I go from 0 to 1/2, how much is that going up by? A half. If I go from half to 1, it's going up by half. But then if I go from 1 to 2, it's 1. So we're running into a little bit of a problem where I can't use my calculator to do the table. So I'm going to show you how, if you ever have a calculator problem, this is how you would plug them in individually. We do it just like we did with our vertex. So let's start with the -1 right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my original problem and plug in the -1 everywhere I see an x. What does a negative number have to have around it whenever it's being squared? Parentheses. So I'm going to start by putting in parentheses -1 squared. I'm going to write on the screen exactly what I'm going to type in my calculator.
Still using f of x.
No, we don't have to use f of x. We can just use regular mode. Now, -1 times -1. Then -2. And you can just press equals. What'd y'all get? 0. Perfect. If that number's 0, what's the last number?
0.
0. So we're going to cut our work in half. We won't have to do all 5 of these. Okay, so now let's plug in 0. So I'm going to write up here on the screen exactly what I'm going to plug in. I'm going to do 0 squared -1 times 0.
Where'd you get the 1 from?
This in the problem, that's B.
Oh.
Okay, and then -2. So what'd y'all get? -2. If that's -2, what's the other side? -2. Now the last thing that we have to plug in is our vertex, which is 1/2. So I'm going to do my fraction bar, then 1/2 squared. So we have 1/2 squared -1 times 1/2 -2. That's exactly what I'm plugging in my calculator. Okay, so most likely you're going to get a fraction. Whenever you have an x value as a fraction, that's fine. What I would do if I were you is I would write it as a mixed number. So let's change -9/4 to a mixed number, which is -2 1/4. -2 1/4. So now I need to graph it.
So we don't have a calculator, we have to do all this stuff.
So we're going to change our graph paper. I'm going to use some bigger graph paper because I realize my numbers aren't very large, especially when I'm dealing with fractions.
Will you answer the problem like this on the test?
Yes, that's why I'm giving it to you on the notes. So we have 1, 2, -1, -2.
So you can't put that in your calculator at all.
No. I mean,
No, it's no.
okay. So where would I put my first point? So -1 and 0. Then 0, -2. Then 1/2. Where is 1/2 on the x-axis?
In between.
Right here between the 0 and the 1. But that's not where I'm going to put my point. I'm going to go down -2 and 1/4. So it's going to be about right there. Okay? Because it's halfway. See, there's halfway. And then I've got to go down 2 and then 1/4. Okay? Then we have +1 and -2 and +2 and 0. So then if we were looking at this graph for the solutions, what would x equal? -1 and +2. That's what it would equal. No. Okay. So let's do the next one. Graph the parabola to find its roots. So the exact same thing. I'm doing the exact same thing as I did on the last one. First of all, can I just label A, B, and C and go ahead? No, because what do I have to have, Carlos?
You gotta have a Y.
Gotta have a Y.
You gotta add 12.
Very good. We're going to add 12 so I can get 0 on one side.
Does it have to be to everything on the middle?
Well, there's no like term, so I'm just going to put it on the back. So it's going to be y equals -4x squared minus 8x plus 12. Now let's label A, B, and C. A is -4, B is -8, C is 12. What is my first step?
You gotta find a thing, which is, you gotta put -b, which is +8
Very good.
over 2 times -4.
Very good. So I have 8 over -8, which is -1. Okay, so because I got a whole number, now I know, okay, I can use my calculator. -1 goes in the middle. What are two numbers smaller than -1? -2 and -3. Two numbers larger, 0 and 1. So now I change my calculator. So I'm going to change the mode to the table mode. So it says the f of x. And I'm going to plug in my original equation, which was -4. I hit alpha x squared minus 8 alpha x plus 12. I skip my g of x. What is my start value for this table? -3. What is my end value? 1. And my step is 1, like it should be. So we get 0, 12, 16, 12, 0. So it's going to be a bigger graph. Okay, so I've got my graph made now, and I'm going to put my first point, which is at -3, 0. So I go to the left 3, stay at 0. Then my next point is at -2, 12, and I've gone up by 2's on the y-axis. Then my next point is at -1, -16. My next point is at 0, 12. And my last point is at 1, 0. Okay. If I were to ask you what the roots were, what are the roots, Carlos? 1 and -3. Very good, because that's where my graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, so the last thing that we are going to do today is solve the equation algebraically to find its roots. Now, this time, they don't give us a graph where we can just look at it and say, oh, the x crosses the axis there. And they don't tell us to graph it to find the roots. They say solve it algebraically, which is actually good news because that means I can do this pretty quickly. All I want to do is solve for x. Do y'all remember doing this on the last test? Okay. Carlos, what would you do first? Add 12. Very good, because I'm trying to get x all alone. So I add 12 to both sides. And I get 3x squared is equal to 12.
And then you divide by 3.
Divide by 3. X squared is equal to 4. Now, is that my answer?
No.
No.
1 in front of the x.
No, not that. The square root, because I got to get x all alone. Square root. What does x equal?
2.
How many answers does a square root or a square always have? Positive and -2. Just like that. Okay? All right. Let's do the next one. What should I do first, John?
Add 5.
Add 5. Very good. Now I have 5x squared equals 5.
And then you would subtract 5 again.
Not subtract 5.
How would you add?
We're not going to add 5 either. What's
Subtract
happening?
5x squared.
No. What's happening between the 5 and the x squared?
We multiply.
Multiplication. So the opposite is division. So we have x squared is equal to 1. So what would I do now? Square root.
Is
What's the square root of 1? 1. So it's just positive negative 1. Okay? All right, Ashley, what would I do now? Divide by negative 2.
Good job, Ashley.
X squared is equal to 9. So now I'm going to do the square root. And what does x equal?
3.
Can I just say 3? Positive negative 3. Very good. Okay? So that's how we solve the equation algebraically to find the roots. All right, and that's everything for 9.5.